When we talk about light and dark, most people imagine angels and demons, good and evil, heroes and villains. But the truth is far more subtle, more personal, and more terrifying. Light and dark are not external forces battling in some cosmic war, they're frequencies within us. They are states of consciousness, levels of awareness, and choices we make moment by moment, often unconsciously. And the most dangerous thing about darkness is that it doesn't always announce itself with thunder. It whispers through comfort, ego, and false certainty. If you're watching this, maybe you've already felt it. A strange change in your energy, a disconnection from the things that once brought you peace, a shift in your thoughts, a heaviness in your heart, a hunger that logic can't explain. Maybe you've dismissed it as a phase, a bad mood, a spiritual dry spell. But what if it's something more? What if your vibration is actually shifting from light to dark? The first sign is subtle but powerful. You no longer resonate with the truth. Not because you're rejecting it out of malice, but because it becomes uncomfortable. You start to avoid reflection. You stop meditating. You scroll more, question less. You begin to crave distraction over depth. Somewhere deep inside you know something is off, but instead of facing it, you rationalize it. This is how the descent begins. Light is truth. It is clarity. And when you begin to move away from that clarity, your vibration begins to dip into denser frequencies. You no longer seek healing, you seek escape. You no longer want to feel, you want to numb. The second sign is emotional inversion. You start to feel power in your anger. You begin to enjoy the bitterness. You identify with your wounds to the point that healing feels like betrayal. You replay the injustices in your mind, not to resolve them, but to feed a fire. And this is where darkness seduces us, not with pain, but with justification. It tells you that your rage makes you strong, that your judgment makes you wise, that your fear is wisdom. But these are illusions. And yet they are so persuasive. You begin to believe that your emotional armor is your identity. And the longer you wear it, the more you forget what it was like to feel light. The third sign is a shift in your desires. When your vibration changes, so does your hunger. You begin to crave things that once repelled you, not just in the physical, but in your thoughts. You think more about control, about power, about being seen, admired, feared. You might not act on these thoughts, but they become louder, and you start to justify them. You notice yourself manipulating people subtly through silence, guilt, or charm. You might even feel a thrill when someone bends to your will. This isn't evil, it's shadow. But left unchecked, shadow becomes self. And once you begin to taste the influence that darkness offers, it is very hard to walk away from the banquet. The fourth sign is spiritual disorientation. You lose your connection to the divine, but not in a way that alarms you. In fact, you might feel more powerful than ever. But this power is rooted in ego. You begin to speak the language of spirituality, yet your heart is no longer aligned with the essence. You use teachings as weapons. You quote wisdom without embodying it. And worse, you start to believe your own performance. You think you're ascending, but really you're falling. You're just falling with style. And the scariest part, people will still praise you. They'll see your glow, not realizing it's a reflection of the light you used to carry. They won't see that it's fading, but you will. Deep down, you know. The fifth sign is isolation, but not the sacred kind. This is not solitude for healing. This is withdrawal with resentment. You begin to believe that no one understands you, that you are beyond others, that you are meant to walk alone because others are too weak, too fake, too low vibrational. You stop connecting. You stop listening. You build walls, not boundaries. And behind those walls, your thoughts grow darker. You begin to romanticize your suffering. You begin to see yourself as the misunderstood anti-hero. And while that story might make you feel special, it is also your cage. Because light doesn't isolate. Light includes. It connects. It softens. Darkness divides. And that division begins inside of you. The sixth sign is the death of joy. Not pleasure, joy. You might still seek thrill, stimulation, dopamine, but real joy, the kind that comes from presence, from love, from simplicity, feels foreign. You start to see the world through a lens of cynicism. You mock what you used to cherish. You roll your eyes at innocence. You feel numb at moments that should move you. And when someone tries to love you, you question their motives. You begin to see kindness as weakness. And in doing so, you cut yourself off from the very medicine that could save you. And finally, the seventh sign is the most haunting. You begin to forget who you are. Not your name, not your story, but your essence. You lose the memory of your light. You can't remember what it felt like to be free, to trust, to dream without fear. And when someone tries to remind you, it feels like a lie. You've become so entangled in the narrative of survival, power, and control that the idea of surrender feels like death. But it's not death, it's rebirth. And you are resisting the one thing that could bring you home. So I ask you now, soul to soul, which of these signs are alive in you right now? Not to shame you, not to scare you, but to awaken you. Because the descent into darkness isn't always loud. Sometimes it feels like peace. Sometimes it feels like safety. Sometimes it feels like power. But if it disconnects you from love, real love, not attachment, then it is not light. And here's the secret no one tells you. You can come back, always. No matter how far you've gone, no matter how long you've been away. The light never stops waiting. It doesn't punish you for forgetting. It simply keeps shining, hoping you'll remember.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
We often speak of darkness as something to fear, something hidden in the unknown. But what if I told you that darkness doesn't always come with claws or chaos? What if it arrives gently, like a whisper in the night, offering you comfort when the world feels too sharp, too bright, too demanding? What if the descent into shadow isn't a fall, but a slow, calculated seduction? Because that's how it truly begins, not with terror, but with a strange sense of safety. A feeling that here, in this place, the world stops demanding your light. It stops asking you to shine. It stops forcing you to be open, to be seen, to be vulnerable. And instead, it lets you rest. It lets you hide. It lets you control. That's the seduction of shadows. You see, the light asks a lot of us. It invites us to forgive, to surrender, to open our hearts even when they've been broken 1,000 times. It calls us to be honest even when the truth is inconvenient. It asks us to release control and trust in the flow of something greater than our own will. That's not easy. That's not always comforting. The light is powerful, but it's not passive. It burns away illusions. It exposes our wounds. And sometimes, after being in that heat for too long, you start to crave the coolness of shade, not realizing that the longer you linger in that shade, the closer you get to full shadow. Darkness, on the other hand, is patient. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand healing. It offers you something sweeter, justification. It tells you that your anger is noble, that your pain is proof of superiority, that your detachment is wisdom. It wraps your ego in a velvet robe and says, you've done enough. You don't need to grow. You don't need to forgive. You don't need to feel anymore. And if you've been hurt deeply, if you've been exhausted by love, by light, by trying so hard to evolve, it's tempting to believe that. It's tempting to stay there. And let's be honest, there's a dark pleasure in it. There's a thrill in giving into your shadow, in saying what you really think, no matter who it wounds, in choosing power over peace, in watching someone squirm under your silence instead of choosing compassion, in knowing you could hurt someone and choosing not to, feeling that control like a crown. We don't talk about this enough in spiritual circles. We pretend that once awakened, we always choose the high road, but that's not true. Awakening doesn't erase the shadow. It only makes us more aware of it. And sometimes that awareness becomes a weapon. So why does darkness feel safer? Because it lets us keep our armor. It doesn't ask us to strip down to the soul. It doesn't ask us to be seen in our rawness. It lets us perform. It lets us control the narrative. It gives us the illusion of power without the vulnerability of love. But that safety is a cage. It's velvet-lined, yes, but still a cage. And the longer we stay in it, the more we forget we're trapped. Here's the paradox. The very thing we think is protecting us is what's keeping us small. The very energy that feels like strength is actually a slow erosion of our soul. Because in the end, darkness doesn't want to destroy you, it wants to consume you. It wants to make you forget your light. Not through violence, but through comfort, through convenience, through the subtle lie that says you are safer alone, you are safer closed, you are safer in control. So I ask you now, where in your life have you mistaken safety for alignment? Where have you chosen silence over truth, control over connection, power over presence? These questions aren't meant to shame you, they're meant to bring you back. Because once you see the shadow for what it is, not as evil, but as trickery, you can begin to reclaim your light. And that's when the real shift begins, not when you run from the darkness, but when you see through it. The moment you realize your vibration has drifted into the denser currents of darkness is not a moment of shame, it's a moment of profound power. You've seen the shadow, you've felt its pull, and now you stand at the edge of something most people never reach, the choice to come back. But how do you return to the light when the darkness has already wrapped itself around your identity? How do you rise when you've forgotten the feeling of flight? The first step is not to fight the darkness, but to face it. Not with judgment, but with awareness. This is where most fail. We try to repress our darker urges, bury our ego, deny our anger, or mask our fears with love and light affirmations. But the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It grows stronger in silence. So if you want to reclaim the flame, you must first be willing to sit with the parts of you that you've disowned. Ask, where did I start to betray myself? What wound did I try to protect by closing my heart? When did I begin to believe that my pain was more powerful than my love? These aren't easy questions. They demand honesty, radical, unfiltered, ego-shattering honesty. And that's where the fire begins to return, not as a spark of hope, but as a fierce flame of truth. Because light, at its core, is not comfort. It is revelation. It is clarity. And clarity can burn. It burns away the illusions you've built to protect your pain. It burns through the false identities you've erected to cope with your wounds. But in that burning, you don't lose yourself, you find yourself. Once you've faced your truth, the second step is intentional reconnection. Darkness thrives in disconnection. From others, from source, from your own heart. So to reverse the shift, you must begin to rebuild those bridges, not by waiting for the perfect moment, but by choosing it. Reconnect with your breath, with stillness, with silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of presence. Meditate not to escape your thoughts, but to meet them, to understand their roots, to listen deeply to what your soul has been trying to say while your ego ran the show. Then, reconnect with others, especially the ones you've pushed away in your descent. Not everyone will be safe. Not everyone will understand. But you don't need the approval of the world. You just need to practice reopening. Reach out. Speak. Forgive. Ask for forgiveness. Give without expectation. Love without control. These are the micro movements that realign your energy with the frequencies of light. They are not dramatic. They are not always comfortable. But they are real, and they are sacred. The next step is realignment through sacred action. Light is not passive. It is active. It moves. It creates. It heals. So you must begin to embody the light again, not just in thought, but in deed. Ask yourself each day, how can I bring more light into this moment? What would love do in this situation? Where am I being called to rise instead of retreat? These questions are not spiritual cliches, they are keys. And every time you choose the higher path, even in the smallest way, you reclaim another piece of yourself. But perhaps the most important step, the one most overlooked, is compassion for the journey. You will not become light overnight. You will stumble. You will fall back into old patterns. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you are human, and the light does not demand perfection. It only asks for your return. Again and again. No matter how many times you've wandered, no matter how long you've been gone, the flame is never fully extinguished. It waits for you, within you. So the deeper question now is not how far have I fallen, but how willing am I to rise? Because rising is not a one-time event. It is a choice you make every day, in every thought, every word, every silence, every breath. There comes a point on the spiritual path when the journey is no longer about escape or return. It becomes about embodiment. You're no longer trying to get back to the light as if it were a place outside of you. You begin to realize, I am the light, not metaphorically, not spiritual, literally. Literally. Every cell in your mind, every beat of your heart carries the code of creation. And once you've reclaimed your energy, faced your shadow, and remembered your essence, you're presented with the final test, not to protect the light, but to become the kind of light that darkness cannot touch. This isn't about spiritual arrogance. It's not about proclaiming superiority or pretending you're invincible. True light doesn't boast. It simply is. It radiates. It holds frequency even when the world around it collapses. It doesn't need to fight the darkness. It reveals it. It transmutes it. But to become that kind of light, you must pass through fire, and not just once, again and again. Because the final test isn't a dramatic battle, it's a quiet series of choices made in silence when no one is watching. The universe will whisper, are you still loving when there is no applause? Are you still forgiving when no one says sorry? Are you still truthful when it would be easier to stay silent? These are the tests, not the grand gestures, but the small invisible acts of integrity that either strengthen your field or weaken it. Because light is not just a frequency, it is a discipline, a way of being, a lifestyle of alignment. And here's the paradox. The deeper into light you go, the more darkness you will see. Not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that your presence is making shadows move. That your vibration is disrupting old patterns, in yourself and in others. You'll notice people projecting onto you, questioning your motives, trying to pull you into drama, or even labeling your peace as pride. Don't react. Don't contract. This is the moment you hold. This is the moment you anchor the light. Because true light doesn't fight shadows, it absorbs them without losing its clarity. You don't need to argue. You don't need to defend. You simply exist as a living reminder that another way is possible. Your very presence becomes medicine, not because it's loud, but because it's pure. And purity is rare in this world. It confuses people. It triggers those who are still running from their own healing. But you're not here to be understood. You're here to remember and to help others remember, simply by being who you are. So how do you become the light that shadows cannot touch? You stop performing. You stop negotiating your truth for comfort. You stop leaking energy into conversations that don't align with your soul. You start protecting your peace like it's sacred because it is. You start choosing silence over validation, presence over productivity, and love over power. Not because it's easy, but because it's you, your truest self, beneath all the stories. This is the final test. To walk through the world untouched by its illusions. To still feel, to still cry, to still break, but to never forget who you are in the process. To never forget that no matter how dark the night becomes, you carry the sunrise inside you. And that no matter how many times the world tries to dim you, your light is not negotiable. It is not conditional. It is eternal. So I leave you with this final question. Are you ready to stop chasing the light and start becoming it? Not for anyone else, not for your old wounds, but because it's who you were born to be. The light that shadows cannot touch. The flame that no storm can extinguish. The truth that needs no defense. You are that light. Now, live like it.